for the fourth Sunday in Lent at St. Thomas Episcopal Church in Eustis, Florida. It is truly a pleasure to record a sermon for the very first time to share with you. One of the many good things that is coming out of this unusual time is that we at St. Thomas are learning new ways to reach out to each other and to a weary world. I realized this week that the word quarantine derives from the Latin word for 40. It refers to the 40 days of Lent, which are traditionally seen as a time to withdraw from the distractions of ordinary life in order to restore health and wholeness. I don't think any of us would have chosen to spend Lent 2020 as it is turning out, but here we are. For the next few minutes, I want to reflect with you on the story in John's Gospel about Jesus healing the man who had been born blind. It's a wonderful story, like the other two we heard the last 2 weeks, rich with symbolic meanings. This story served as an inspiration for John Newton's beloved hymn, Amazing Grace. As always, when a character is not named in the Gospels, we are especially invited to think of ourselves in their place. All of us, spiritually speaking, can claim having been blind and then seeing as we grow more deeply into our relationship with Christ. And all this happens by God's amazing grace. John's Gospel was written much later than the other 3 canonical Gospels. The community John had before him as he wrote was facing problems that had not yet developed when the other Gospels were being written down. One of the problems that John's fledgling Christian community encountered was isolation, and that problem they faced and John addressed speaks to our period of isolation in which we all find ourselves now to varying degrees. So let's walk through the story and see how masterfully John sets the stage. A man who was blind from birth probably had spent all his life in obscurity in the margins of his community. Suddenly, he finds himself in the bright and unwelcome spotlight of public controversy. Jesus spreads mud over his eyes, directs him to wash in a pool that is named Sent, and suddenly the man can see. Everybody in the community begins to rejoice over this miracle of healing, right? Well, no. Inquiring minds don't pause for gratitude and celebration. They can't take things at face value. How did this happen? Inquiring minds demand. The blind man tells him the little he knows about the miracle: spit, mud, water, and then sight. Off the poor man is hustled before the Pharisees. They too demand an explanation. Spit, mud, washing, sight, they are told. Well, that can't be. Jesus did this on the Sabbath and is therefore a sinner. Sinners can't accomplish healings like this. Tell us the truth. And out of the man's mouth, who once was blind but now sees, pops a revelation. Jesus is a prophet. Annoyed by this response, the Pharisees haul over the man's parents and demand to know from them how it is that their son can now see. The parents are terrified of saying too much about Jesus because they knew that the fix was in. Anybody who said that Jesus was the Messiah would be kicked out of the synagogue. That would be a dreadful thing to happen, because not only would worshiping there be forbidden, but so also would open conversation with all the other members. Merchants would even be forbidden from selling food and other supplies to them after being kicked out of the synagogue. So the parents, for their own sake, and for the sake of their son as well, did not want to risk that. They send the inquiring minds back to their son. The formerly blind man by this time is now feeling like some kind of ping pong ball being bounced all around. The Pharisees haul him back for more grilling. Explain how it is that you have been healed, they demand. The poor blind man says, quite honestly, I told you once. Why do you want me to tell you again? Do you also want to become his disciple? Oops, it slipped out. Perhaps this man was realizing it only at the moment he was now speaking it. He had become a disciple of Jesus. And he manages to offend his interrogators by asking if maybe they too want to become a disciple. So the formerly blind man now can see, and his miraculous healing set in motion events with the result that he was no longer allowed to participate in the community life he had known all his life. Although he could now see, he would become more isolated than when he had been blind. But he found something better. Lord, I believe, he tells Jesus, and he worships Jesus. John's telling of the story ends here, but life was just taking off for the formerly blind man. Most of us, at least at first, have been frustrated by the mandatory isolation caused by the coronavirus precautions. We are sad not to get to attend church services, sad not to be able to gather in restaurants, sad for those who have lost employment, and sad not to be able to buy the things we want in stores. It has become the very strict Lent we would never have chosen for ourselves. Yet, we can realize the spiritual benefits of these involuntary Lenten disciplines just as fully as if we had chosen them ourselves. Let me share with you a poem that says all this quite beautifully. The poem, called Pandemic, is by Lynn Unger. What if we thought of it as the Jews consider the Sabbath, the most sacred of times? Cease from travel, cease from buying and selling. Give up, just for now, on trying to make the world different than it is. Sing, pray, touch only those to whom you commit your life. Center down. And when your body has become still, reach out with your heart. Know that we are connected in ways that are terrifying and beautiful. You could hardly deny it now. Know that our lives are in one another's hands. Surely that has come clear. Do not reach out your hands. Reach out your heart. Reach out your words. Reach out all the tendrils of compassion that move invisibly where we cannot touch. Promise this world your love, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, so long as we all shall live. I wish for all those who are listening a peaceful Lent. May we discover in this quarantine joys we would never have guessed. May we not forget the 3 hallmarks of Lent: fasting, almsgiving, and extra prayer. By fasting instead of hoarding, the shelves in our grocery stores will be replenished. By almsgiving, those who have lost employment will find help. Through extra prayer, God can work miracles, for nothing is impossible for God. Amen?
Amen.